Alrighty, today we got the Peterson Tree Care out of Utah, 3120. This one got a handful of new parts. We'll find out why it was locked up. Full rebuild, case split, and porting. So, let's get to it. Alright, something a little different, something a little bigger. If you follow on Facebook, you seen the picture of this the other day. One of the air filter housing bolts worked its way loose, found its way under the cylinder. You can see the impression right there. That's for a 4mm bolt. Did number on the piston. Cracked it, locked it, stuck on the counterweight. Luckily the jug didn't get too bad. Little ding there, little mark there. But other than that, that's about it. Nothing ever made it to the top. So this one's getting tore down. Be a full rebuild. I'll check the crank, make sure everything looks good. But it should be good to go. It stopped at the bottom. Nothing went through everything, but new bearings, gaskets, seals. So we'll finish tearing this one down. Oh, it's getting a new tank. A bunch of new stuff. It'll be a new saw once it's done. Nice thing about flywheel being magnetic. Stick all the parts to it. Bad thing about the flywheel being magnetic, all the parts stick to it. Now the seal's in the oil pump on these, so just want to remember that. We'll go over once it's all cleaned up, put a new seal in it. Alright, should be all the case bolts. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 it looks like. We'll just double check, make sure that this here oil tank is empty, because that makes a mess on the bench if it's not. Get the handy dandy case splitter. Hey, look at that spider. And they pop apart like so. Get the halves cleaned up, get the crank cleaned up. New bearings put in, seals. Once I get it cleaned up, I'll come back. Alright, we've had this heating for 5 or 10 minutes or so. Nice and hot. Depending on what you're using, you want to make sure that you don't boil your powder coat off the case. So I'll set this down and we'll see if we can wiggle this bearing in without it going crooked on us. Wish me luck. That bearing warms up to the case once it's seated, and you should be able to slide your crank in. If not, we got the tool to pull it in. But... Alright, so I got the crank started. And we'll tighten this up and get the rest of the way in. The setup draws the crank in nice and true, seats it right on the bearing. No hammering needed. That side's pulled on, just like so. Go roundy roundy. And get the gasket out. I like to put just a little bit of sealant on these case halves just in case. These sleeves are pulling on the threads and pressing on the race, so you're not going to mess up the bearings with it. Looks like everything's lining up. There we go, cinched in. And as you can see, everything's still nice and free without the seals in. Put the seals in, they'll add some drag. But sometimes when you pull them in with the case bolts or you tap them in and whatnot, the bearings will get a little crooked and you'll have some drag, and then you'll have to tap it, the ends with a brass hammer, and that'll free it right up if you have any tight spots. Might have to tap one side or tap the other. But cases are together. I'll get the bolts cleaned up, put a little bit of Loctite on them, and be ready to put together. The new flywheel side seals in, and I'll do the oil pump side. On the 3120 and some of the 2 series saws, I think most of the 2 series saws, the PTO seal is in the oil pump. So you want to make sure you drive that in far enough. And then the 3120 uses this little O-ring. Goes around here to seal the bearing bore. So I'll make sure that's on. Make sure your oil pump O-ring, the tank O-ring, and the pickup is in place. We'll slide this over. Be careful of the square edge of the crank that it doesn't mess up your seal. I put a little bit of oil on the seal. And we'll try and get this seated on. Said I already put the flywheel side in. All OEM Husqvarna. 6203 Husqvarna bearings. Finished up cutting the squish on the 3120. Took 40 thousandths out of the band, just a smidge over 1 millimeter. All nice and pretty now. Right, get a squish measurement. Then we'll trim the base. I'll shoot for 25 to 28 thousandths squish on this one. All right, check the squish. So 45 thousandths. I'll take off about 18. And we'll call that good for the squish. Lay it out and port it. All right, here's the finish. 3120 cylinder. Widened the lowers, raised the uppers. Widened and lowered the intake. And raised and widened the exhaust. Cut the squish band. This one, we ended up 71 intake, 98 exhaust, 120 transfers. Squish at 27 thousandths. And we took 40 thousandths out of the band. This 3120 did not have the high jet. So I sent this out, Kevin Levanway. He modified it and installed the high jet for us. So we'll get this put on. This one, it does have a black coil, but I think these are 12.5 black coils, but we'll leave that. That's plenty for what we're doing here. Still building the work saw. But we'll be able to fully adjust it. We'll get this cleaned up, get this cylinder stuck down, then assemble all the intake parts. Put fresh gaskets on the intake block. All right, with that needle, we need to grind out this area to make sure it fits good. You can see it just touches in that area. So we'll get that ground out. Now we can put the carb on. There's the muffler mod. Nice open hole under there. Get this slid on, new exhaust gasket. Get this spike put on. We'll Loctite all these bolts. Same thing, put some Loctite on these lower muffler bolts. Get the handle put on. Alright, I put a piece of air filter foam down in these pockets. And the regular filter will hold them in. Keep those bolts from rattling out. Alright, we'll fill it up and see how she runs. Make sure everything's topped off so we can check for leaks and all those good things. Alrighty, there she be. Big, bad 3120. Wish me luck. Oh, that's a whole lot of saw. Alrighty, since this one came in non-running, this is a stock run from a brand new 3120 that I had in the system. You can see it's RPM limited, but made just about 8 horse. The line's back here at 8,400, just below peak. That's where the new one peaks. And we went from 7.7 to 11.17 horse, which that's a pretty healthy gain. Works out to about 38% from peak to peak. This saw with a little bit higher coil and the fully adjustable carb allows it to rev out better than the stock saw. We added all sorts of torque and more power where you're going to use it with these big saws. So overall, pretty happy with that gain. And that's a lot of power right where you're going to use it. This is still a work saw build, so you could add even more muffler and a bit more radical ports, and we'll get it moved up higher in the RPM. Everything else just closer to what the race saws are doing. But we still want something that's going to run, cut, and idle normal. So overall, pretty happy with that. Nice gains out of this. Just want to share with everyone. Alright, thanks a lot.